Okay. Just give me 1 second here. Do. And do check, check. All right. Okay. YouTube is telling me my bitrate is low. Interesting. I wonder if making this a different number while I'm streaming is a bad idea. Let's find out. Okay, still seems to be alive. Okay, I suppose that's good. Okay. Alright, let me make sure everything's good. Okay, I do believe. Alright, everything's good. Okay. So now I'm gonna just explain what the deal is. This is a track that's not in Rush Kill Repeat yet, but it is going to be. If you listen to the stuff that's on my SoundCloud, you may have already heard this. Been there for a while. But anyway, basically the theme for this track was like the level is going to be called Cloudlands. And I don't remember the rest of the explanation of it, but it's basically there are clouds and shit. So a lot of the choices made in this were made basically in order to stay in line with like a, you know, floaty, cloudy sort of theme. And it is not a coincidence there's a lot of atmospheric stuff to this track. Atmospheric styles of music are not called that for no reason. Well, I guess they might be, but that's I didn't use that here for no reason. That's the reason I chose to do that sort of thing. So where should I start? I'm gonna start with, okay, the first thing I'm gonna do is make my life a little bit easier when I'm showing you some of this stuff. I'm just gonna put everything, all of the notes in the same pattern. I want to do a magic trick. If you select a bunch of different patterns, and you can also do this with audio, but it's not as straightforward. Or, I mean, it is, but the results are not always as good. But if you select a bunch of different ones of these patterns, okay, just making sure I didn't select that too. If you select all the patterns, or just two, but if you select some patterns and you hit Control G or go in here and hit this, they all become the same. And that's going to be nice because now I can show you all of the thing without clicking between a bunch of different patterns. So, actually the first thing that I'm going to do is show off some early versions of this track. Okay, so here's the first, these are just like MP3s that I have from back when I was working on this. Anyway, here's the first version, the very first draft that I first sent to Philip. I hope it's not too loud. Anyway, here it is. All right. And now here's the, I only sent Philip 2 versions of this before it was basically done. But anyway, here's the second version. All right. So this track is, so far, it's one of my favorites that I've made for RKR. And it's sort of, this is sort of a mood that I've been in lately for making music. If you listened to the EP I put out not too long ago, the first 2 tracks on that and the third one too, I suppose, have a lot in common with, actually, especially the third one for a reason I'll get into in a minute. But the tracks on that EP have a lot in common with this. Because that's basically, you know, this is sort of the thing that I've been trying to do lately, where usually what I do is I try new stuff with every track. I try to learn how to do something, or I try to just do something I'm not that familiar with, do something that's sort of interesting to me that I don't fully understand yet. Like with all that shit that I've been doing with the guitar, where I've been trying to use guitars and electronic music like some kind of weirdo. That's fun, and I am still gonna do that. And there are tracks that are gonna be in ArcIR where I pretty much do that. But that's really hard. And sometimes I would rather not do that. And when I don't do anything that's hard for me, and I only do stuff that I know really well, that like I pretty much knew like before I put a single one of these notes down, that like I was not like guessing with any of them. I was like, all right, the next note is going to be this one, and then this one, and that one, and that's pretty much how I went about making most of this, not all of it. Especially not the beginning. The beginning's a little bit weird, and like it stands out against the rest of the track as kind of an interesting little outlier. But the rest of it, like all of this, like especially like the second half, I was like, that was 100% cruise control. Like I've been there a bajillion gazillion times. And it turned out to be one of my favorite things that I've ever made, to be perfectly honest. Like I love how this track sounds. So let me get into where this whole thing started. And it's basically, the first thing that I made was this. This is the very first thing that this track was. It was just those two chords. And these, you'll notice, are pretty weird. So it's, those two chords. It's B minor 7, and then C minor add 6. You could also write it as like an A half diminished 7, but C is in the bass, so it's technically a C minor 6. But not that kind of minor 6, like this kind of minor 6, which I usually just call C minor add 6. If you just say C minor 6, people I think usually would think you mean that, because that's like the C minor 6 chord in, you know, the key of C minor. But this is not C minor, this is, so it's that chord. And you'll notice the 7 note is, the A note is the same, is shared between the two chords, and that's pretty important. That's pretty much the reason why I chose these two chords. All of the decisions I made with this were basically like, what does floaty sound like? What does clouds? What do clouds sound like? And that's sort of, like a interpretive sort of question. But I, you know, picked whatever my interpretation of that was. That was the choices I made. So I figured, first of all, 7th chords, like obviously. Like, come on. 7th chords were obviously gonna come out. And having notes shared between 2 chords is something that I figured fit that theme, and then having the bass line only move 2 notes for the whole intro. The bass line is only ever B and C, or the root of the chord rather, not the bass line. But it only moves half steps. And also, fuck key signatures. I'm not doing any of that, not here, because clouds don't have key signatures, obviously. I mean, that's kind of a joke, but that is the reason why I wanted all of this to be non-diatonic. And so after I made those chords, I believe the next thing I did was I added this other synth to them. Just as a bit of layering. Oh, I forgot. I'm going to turn off the sidechaining for this part. So anyway, yeah, this is the first thing I made. And then the second thing is this one. And they pretty much follow each other. This is like pretty much layering, so. The only difference in the notes is that I should talk about the sound design actually. So this guy, man, that's a whole lot of effects. It's basically like a keyboard sort of sound, so I have the volume going down like this. I'm not doing anything else with an envelope, I think. It's a super saw with some phase randomness, and the panning is all the way up, so it's wide. Like if I didn't do that, it'd sound like this. So it's in both your ears, which, you know, if you imagine like you're floating through clouds, you know, they're on, you know, a cloud could be, you could touch a cloud with both your ears at once if you stuck your face in a cloud. So that's basically why I did that. And there's also the harmonizer. Which makes it sound like you're playing octaves, like. And that's basically it for this one. There's some distortion, I suppose. But yeah, it's basically just a super saw, harmonizer, pluck. Sounds like a keyboard. Oh, and then I'm running it through a guitar cab sim, just because why not? So it sounds like it's coming out of the speakers of a guitar cabinet, and this is an EQ. Detail, or like a little bit of nuance about these guitar cabs. They don't have the very bottom frequencies, but the ones they do have, there's this like really big like peak at the on the low, like low mids, like low sort of area. So since there's no point in this instrument having bass, because there's gonna be a bass that's not this, and it's not a very, like, there's like no reason for this instrument to have bass, so I just cut that out with a high pass. And then right around 4 kilohertz, I just do a big old cut because that band of frequencies in instruments that aren't like the melody, instruments that you don't really want to be focusing on, or like that you don't want to draw that much attention from the listener, you don't want them to be super loud with this, because if there's a bunch of instruments with that frequency super loud, it's going to be really annoying. Like, listen to this. It's just super annoying, especially with the guitar cabs. Those are pretty loud in cabs, so I turned that off. I cut it at 11.1 dB, negative 11.1 dB, and also I'm very slightly lowering the treble. There's not really a whole lot of need to do that. It's just, this is not like a instrument that I want to be super flashy. I just want it to be basically there. That turns it into this, and there's some compression. And there's a bunch of reverb and delay, obviously. There's this impulse response. You can find these in this folder in FL. And in the reverb devices, this one is the one called 4-pad sounds. Oh, it's off. Well, it sounds like... Okay, that's really quiet, but this one, it's called 4-pad sounds, and this is basically a pad. A pad is like, it's not really a pad, because a pad usually isn't like plucking notes. It's usually like a droning, like, chords, basically, or maybe not even chords, maybe just one note. They're used for like tuning a lot, or if you like have been to a church, they tend to keep the pad playing like for the entire service, basically. And I figured that sort of thing would be a correct choice for cloudy sort of atmospheric feel. And then delay and reverb like this, obviously. Lots of 5.5 second decay time, very long decay time. Have the frequency cutoffs all the way off, and I have a bunch of modulation. So there's a bunch of phase cancellation, and it sounds, you know, it does that. And there's some more compression. Pretty harsh compression, actually. This is actually quite a bit of compression, but that's sort of what I want. This is not... There are other instruments that do, that are going to be doing dynamic stuff. Actually, wait a minute. I'm a fool. This one does do dynamic stuff, but not in volume. And that's just bringing the volume down. Okay, before I move on, this other instrument. Okay, there are some interesting things happening with this guy. Pretty much just because I felt like doing it, to be honest. I didn't have a super clear idea of what this guy was gonna sound like ahead of time. I pretty much just thought I want some more support on the notes that the keyboard instrument. I want some more support on the notes that this keyboard instrument is playing. Cause like when the whole, because I have the notes held until the end of the chord. When all the other instruments are playing and when all the other notes in this guy are playing, it sort of doesn't really register like which note is the one being played. So I have this one that this one doesn't need to have the notes held all the way. The reason it looks like that is because I copy pasted it from this instrument. I copy pasted it and I just raised these notes up to the other octave. And I didn't bother shortening them. I just have these guys turned on in Harmor, and it automatically just cuts all of the extra notes off when they need to be cut off, and I don't need to think about it any more than that. But this guy is only ever playing one note at a time, so it goes up here, it goes this note, this note, this note, this note, this note, in order. It's basically just sliding between all those notes. It's not playing them and holding them like the other instrument is. And it's also not plucking every note. It's because it's sliding between them. It works really well in a layer with this other instrument. It works nicely to support it. So I think, and I have these two going for the whole track pretty much. So let's talk some more about these chords. So this intro bit basically has 4 bars, and it repeats 4 times. And on the third and fourth repeat, the second chord is different. So let's take a look at that. Oh, I'll do it like this. And you got a bit of the dynamics I was hinting at a second ago. Anyway, so these other chords are C major 7 and C dominant 7. So they're both still C's, but instead of the minor chord, now they're major. And then it goes from B natural to B flat. Yeah, again, for no real particular reason, it's sort of meandering, that's intentional. I mean, that's sort of the feel I wanted to have. And then the melody for this section is played in the bass. So this instrument is the bass, and it sounds like this. Don't worry, I'll talk about the time signature in a second. I know it's weird. Okay. Oh yeah, and I forgot about the slide note at the end of it there. Whoops. So yep, there's the bass, and let's talk about the sound design of the bass a little bit. Not super complicated. So it's basically a pluck. It's another super saw with phase randomness. But it's also low passed and distorted pretty hard. Without the distortion, it sounds like this. basically a super saw with a slight pluck to it, like. Wait, where was this? 35? I don't remember. I'm gonna just do that. Okay, it was 35. And then with distortion it sounded like this. And then to add the lo-fi, like 8-bit sort of feel. I know it's not really 8-bit, like nothing in this track is, but to add that sort of feel, I use this lo-fi effect. It's pretty subtle on this particular instrument, but it adds a lot, in my opinion. And so anyway, the rest of this is a bunch of mixing stuff, basically. There's, wow, yikes. This, so, let me, okay. So all of this, and this, and this, and this are all mixing stuff. So this guy is some extra distortion. It's basically using this soft saturation knob. I just turned it all the way down. This is a distortion, and it's supposed to mimic like the way it's supposed to mimic some analog thing that I'm not really familiar with. I think it's like tape, something to do with tape, some type of distortion that happens with tape somehow. That I haven't really looked into it, but it mimics something like that. I basically just use it as a type of distortion. That's the only thing that I really think of it. It causes distortion, so it's distortion in my mind. I mean, it is obviously literally distortion, even in the analog, like the thing that it's emulating, but I basically use it as an effect, is what I'm saying. I don't use it to emulate anything. And then this guy basically corrects for an annoying thing about this lo-fi effect. And it's that. You honestly can't really see it all that clearly here, but I can certainly hear it. And it's basically the lo-fi effect. Because of the nature of what it does, it adds certain, like very particular, certain high frequencies. And those can be kind of annoying, so I just cut them out. That technically means it's not like super faithful to the effect. Like it doesn't, like you wouldn't be able to do that if you were actually playing music on an 8-bit chip or whatever. So it doesn't actually do the downsampling. So like the final product is not actually technically the same as if it was downsampled, but I don't care. It sounds, I get the sound I want, so I don't care. I cut them out. It's annoying, I don't want them anymore, so I get rid of it. It can cause it to sound a bit like it has a low pass filter or something like that on it, or like a high shelf or something. You could correct for that by like just doing something like this. But this instrument is bass, so I don't really care about that. I just let it be the way it is. And then the rest of this is all mixing stuff. That's what that guy sounds like. And the notes are not. It's not really doing anything super interesting with the notes. They're mostly just chord tones. They're mostly just the notes that are already in the chord. So I just play through those. It sticks with the root mostly. And it also follows the drums. Like. Yeah, it mostly follows the drums. Okay. And now I'm gonna talk about. Now I'm gonna finally address the elephant in the room. Okay. Let's talk about this time signature. Okay, so, well, I'm gonna just do the first 4 bars, because there's no reason to make it more complicated than it has to be. So anyway, this is 4 bars, alright? Here's the first bar. Here's the second bar. Here's the 3rd bar. There's the 4th bar. And that's, I mean, it's as simple as that. That's the time signature. It's whatever those 4 bars are, that's the time signature. So it starts with a measure of 4/4, and then it has a measure of 7/8, because this is 7/8 notes in a measure, so that's a 7/8 measure. And then this, 1, 2, 3, 4, that's a measure of 4/4. And finally, another measure of 4/4. And this repeats for the whole track. It's 4/4, 7/8, 4/4, 4/4, 4/4, 7/8, and it repeats like that. This way of doing things is more common than you might think. If you've never seen this done before, you might be thinking, like, what? How'd you come up with that? And the answer is, I didn't come up with that. This is a pretty common thing to do. Just for one example, I mean, there's a bunch. The first one that comes to my head, which is very similar to this, is a Soundgarden song called "The Day I Tried to Live." The bass line in "The Day I Tried to Live," it's off of Super Unknown. It's my personal favorite Soundgarden songs. It's one of my favorite songs of all time. And basically the bass line goes like this. Whoops, like this. So this is basically the way "The Day I Tried to Live" goes. Whoops. It's also in a different tempo. Something like that, probably. Well, a little slower. So that's the main riff from "The Day I Tried to Live," And wait, I just played it, I didn't even explain it. So it's a one measure of 4/4, then a measure of 3/4, minus 7/8, so it goes this long, but in The Day I Tried to Live it's 3/4, so it stops here. And then it's another measure of 4/4, and then another measure of 4/4. So it's the same pattern of changes, but I changed to a different time signature, basically. And that's the explanation of what's going on in this track. It's kind of like The Day I Tried to Live. Is basically the explanation. So let's listen to these drums. Wait, what? Oh, it's 9. This one. And here. Okay. Let's just listen for a bit. I'm gonna turn off everything except for the drums and the effects, the like noise, the whooshy like sound effects, and this guy, which I'll talk about in a minute. I'm gonna turn everything else off. So these guys, and I think that's everything except the drums. So yeah, let me make sure this. Okay. All right, here we go. Whoops. Song, not pattern. Okay, here we go. Oh, whoops, I changed the tempo. Whoopsies. Okay, now, here we go. And it swings back around because obviously in the game the tracks all loop. So, and there's something interesting going on at the very end to make it loop nicely, which I'll talk about in a minute. Anyway, the drums. The drums. All right, let's talk about these. So, I have been, as you'll know if you've seen my last few streams, I have been really fussing over these blasted things. Drums are something I was not very good at making use of in my music until pretty recently, I would say. So, what should I talk about first? So here's actually here's what I'll talk about first. You may have noticed something about the kick at certain points in the track where it sounds kind of weird. Allow me to, clarify what's going on here. So anyway, here's what the kick and snare sound like by themselves. Now, that's kind of weird, isn't it? Um, and the answer is I basically constructed these drums out of multiple drums. They're like Frankenstein's monster combinations of drums. I think I did this on previous live streams. These days I do this all the time because I don't really buy. Oh hey Philip, what's up? Because I don't really buy drum samples that often, or samples at all very often. I've been using the same, like this really, whoops, OBS just gave me a notification that it disconnected for a second. It doesn't look like the stream died, so I'm gonna keep talking and hope that nothing bad happened. Anyway, I've been using this one really super duper minimal cymatics free pack, and like half of this Virtual Riot pack from like a decade ago that I bought and haven't gotten the rest of because the website where they sold this, I don't even know if it exists anymore. I don't know if I'd be able to find this pack, and I would have to recover my account to that website. I don't actually even know why I only have like a third or a half of this sample pack. I guess I just moved it when I was moving it between hard drives or something. I just fucked it up and like just left half of them in there or something. I don't know. But anyway, this pack is like a decade old. And then I have this other Virtual Riot pack. This one is free. I just looked it up if Virtual Riot had a newer pack, and there was this one and it was free, and I just downloaded that. And those are the only 3 sample packs that I ever use, basically. And then also the ones that are in FL, but you know, that like come with FL. I have those obviously. And that's like it for drums for me. So some would say that's the reason my drums sucked for so long, but I would say it was a skill issue. Because what I do nowadays is if I like a part of a drum, but not the whole drum, I'll just take that part and combine it with another drum that I like the rest of better. So like for example, I have 2 snares here. Not you. Yeah. I have this guy for the high part. Oh, and I'm also doing a lot of sound design work on this guy. I have that guy for the high end and this guy for the low end. It actually does not sound that bad to just play them at the same time. That's kind of funny. But anyway, because I wanted them to sound better than that when played at the same time, I just took this one and did this. Just cut out the very bottom of it. So it's just that. And then for the other one, I did the opposite. I just cut out everything except the super high end. And then I just played them at the same time. And that's my new drum. And for this guy, I did the same lo-fi trick that I do for everything else. Then another EQ, because doing this effect puts some low frequency stuff, low frequency sort of noise that I don't want, so I cut that out. And there it goes. And then there's some reverb. A convenient thing about doing this is I can put reverb just on the high end, which is pretty nice. I don't have to fiddle with this cut or do anything weird. I can just put reverb on the highs, which is super nice. So there's my snare drum for this track. And for the kick, I do something kind of interesting. So that's the low end of the kick. It's just one of these attack kicks that are in FL. There's like a gazillion of them. I just picked one and put a little EQ on the bottom, and that's what it is. And then for the high part of it, it's these guys. Let me try and even find where I got this. It might be like in here or something. It might be one of these. Hang on. Oh yeah, I think it's these guys. I used these for the high end, which might seem kind of weird, and it pretty much is weird. But basically, I do this to make the gain super high, and then I have this ridiculously extreme EQ. So it sounds like this. Because if I don't do that, it's literally just... There's like almost no high end to these kicks. But I use a ridiculously extreme EQ to bring them out. Because they're there. There's always high end in kicks. Pretty much. And then I have a flanger, which is another weird choice. The reason I did this, and also the reason I have 4 of these samples that I just trigger randomly pretty much, the reason I do this is so that every hit of the kick is slightly different. Of the high end anyway, the low end of the kick is always the same, but I have I do this so that every hit of the kick is a little different. It's a pretty subtle effect, but I basically just I don't really like it when every hit of a drum is the same, like the exact same, sort of like it's a sample. It's sort of, I guess it doesn't really bother me most of the time, and it also doesn't bother most people, but it's sort of, if you're focusing on it and you listen to it really hard, it's sort of like almost breaks your immersion. Which is a weird thing to say about a song. But that's sort of how it feels to me, and that's the reason why I do this sort of thing sometimes. Sometimes I just put flangers on random shit just to make it, just so it changes over time very slightly. I turn the rate, like you can see I turned it way, way down. So hertz, 1 hertz is 1 time per second, and I have it set to 0.06 hertz, which is like once every 15, 16 seconds or something like that. Maybe more like 14 or 13 seconds. But yeah. So I just wanted to have every kick be a little bit different. And then here's the lo-fi effect yet again. I have it set pretty high so I don't have to do any funky EQ business. And then there's this. This is distorting it, and that's kind of partly why I wanted it, but I also wanted every kick to be the same volume, so. So there's the explanation for the kick and snare. So what next? The cymbals. So I'll go with the ride first. So this should be pretty expected of my cymbals these days. But basically, it's this sample. I hit open classic 02, which is this guy. It's that sample, but I went to this. I set the time stretching mode to stretch, and then I set the multiplier to 400%, so it's 4 times as long. Which is why this hi-hat, which is why basically why I'm using a hi-hat for a ride sample. This is something I love to do all the time when I don't care whether or not the drum samples sound like real drums. Which obviously in Rush Kill Repeat soundtrack, because it's supposed to conjure up a picture of a time before it was really possible to have computers make realistic sounds. I don't really care about that almost at all, and I almost want most of the drums to sound like fake. So I set the time stretching really, really far. I basically push this stretching algorithm to the limit so it sounds older than it is. And that's how I get this sound. It's again not like super faithful to the era that this is emulating. I'm not literally making a period piece here. But I just want to give you an idea of that time period. You know, as long as people understand what I'm going for, that's really all I care about. And to be honest, that's all most people care about. Nobody has ever, like, I don't know for sure how Toby Fox made the Undertale soundtrack, for example, but I'm pretty sure it's not made like on actually old hardware. It's probably made on a DAW much like this one. It might even have been FL Studio. It just happens to sound like that because that's the kind of music Toby likes. So he wrote it to sound like that. And that's basically the sort of thing I'm going for here. Anyway, this sample also has a bunch of reverb. And I cut out the low end because there's no point in having that. Oh, it was FL? Okay. Yeah, the Earthbound sound font. That is something Toby Fox would do. And that does make it a little bit more faithful than I was implying. But it was literally FL, so I was right about that. I might have known that. I was sort of second guessing myself. I was like 60% sure he used FL. Anyway, that's just changing the volume. And yeah. So that's the ride sample, and then the hat is this. Oops. The hat sounds like this with no effects. So this guy is another one from that same pack. Open_relaxed. Where are you? This guy. So it's that one. And for this one, I'm doing actually the opposite of the other one. I'm shortening it. The multiplicator is at 55.1%. To make it shorter. It's like that. Another way of accomplishing this sort of same thing, if you ever want to make a sample shorter in a different way and you don't care about the pitch, you can go up to this guy and give it a pitch change like this, because the way this particular pitch knob works is it just speeds and slows the sample by the ratio, the ratio of whatever interval this is. So like if it's at 2, then it speeds it up by the ratio of a whole tone, and if it's at 3, it speeds it up by the ratio of a minor third. So it makes it shorter. And the opposite, it makes it longer. Anyway, I didn't do that here. I just used the stretcher thing. And again, much like the other one, some reverb, some EQ. Wait. That is not as much EQ as I was expecting, but that's apparently what I did, so I'm going to leave it like that. And then, again, just using a limiter to change the volume. If you can't tell, I didn't have a super... I still don't have a super established, like, repeatable, I do the exact same thing every time sort of workflow, as you can tell by the fact that I turned the gain down here, and then I also turned this fader down. But anyway... That's what those cymbals sound like. Man, I love listening to stuff soloed. This is like my favorite. That part of it is honestly my favorite part of making music in general, is just listening to every individual piece that makes up the whole track. I remember in like band class in high school, I was always super interested in how every individual part of all of the pieces we played was, I thought, really beautiful on its own. And the way that they all came together to make a whole thing was super interesting to me. So, and in the same way as that, I love when I finish a track and I go back and listen to all of the individual pieces. Like if I had access to somebody else's like project file, like if I had a famous artist's stems or whatever, that's like 80% of what I would do probably, is just solo every single thing and listen to it on its own. That's almost my favorite part of doing this. And let me mention one more thing before doing what I was about to do. So, the sidechaining on this track. I'm pretty sure I talked about sidechaining already in another live stream, but I'm gonna mention it here. The ducking. You can hear and you can see up here how even with the drums muted, all of the other instruments get quieter when the drums hit. That is a technique that helps with mixing, and the reason I do that is because it's a technique that helps with mixing. How I do that is by having this sound, this guy. I just have this guy trigger every time the drums hit, and then I use this plugin called a peak controller. And what this is, where's a so what this peak controller plugin is basically is As you can see in the way a compressor works is a compressor is basically an automatic volume envelope. It basically controls the volume automatically of whatever you run through the compressor. A peak controller is basically the same thing, but instead of compressing the audio, instead of using that volume envelope to change the volume, you can just take the line that it draws and use that to modulate something else. So I can take the output from this peak controller plugin and put it on, for example, the keyboard synth, and I can set it to control this, and I use the inverted setting here to have it do the opposite of whatever the line is, instead of just doing what the line is. Because if I didn't do that, it would sound like this. The instrument would only make sound when the drums hit, and I want it to do the opposite. So that's basically how I get everything to duck in volume when the drums hit. Is by having that guy. The way I used to do this was I would just go to the kick or whatever and put a peak controller here and just do it that way. And you can do that, but one problem is it's only going to apply to the kick, and I want it to apply to both the snare and the kick. And two, even if you were going to put a peak controller on both the kick and the snare and apply it to everything, then you just have two of these, and you have to apply two of them to, you would have to have two fruity balances for every single thing you want to duck. And that's annoying, and I didn't want to do it anymore, so I just made a little sine wave guy to do both at once. And also, you'll notice this guy is really, really short. It doesn't last very long at all. The volume goes down, the curve is really extreme, and the tail doesn't even go all the way to the end of the quarter note. Because this is not a very loud track, it's not like this is not like, I'm not gonna play this at any EDM festivals or anything and blow people's ears out. I don't need to shake the ground with the bass or anything. So the sidechaining, doesn't need to be very extreme, because the mixing on this track is honestly not that hard. I didn't need to do anything super sophisticated with the mixing. It's just multiband compression again, and then limiter. Pretty simple stuff. So there was no need to have a whole lot of sidechaining. Anyway, speaking of what I was talking about a minute ago, where I love to listen to things soloed, I really want to take a listen to some of the stuff over here, soloed. Okay, one more time without the sidechaining. Hell yeah. So, this guy. Where is it? Here. So, I really, really like this dude. And so part of my method with this track was I wanted to lately I've been trying to make use of more interesting sound design stuff in the higher pitched synths. usually in EDM it's just like bass gets all the attention, and that's where all of your sound design muscle is applied. But you can also do some cool stuff with the regular dudes. And specifically with this guy I'm using, and also I think the other guy. No, just this guy. Does anything else use the... No, it's just this guy. So this guy, I use a trick with this, with delay, which is kind of interesting. Again, this was another thing that this track shares in common with the tracks that are on my EP. Whatever it was called, Capricci or something like that. Capricci or whatever. That's the name of it. Especially the first one, the first track on that guy. I used the same delay trick on the melody in that guy. Where basically with this particular delay plugin, I'm just gonna turn everything. I'm gonna turn everything off. Here's that synth with no effects. That's the starting point for this guy. It's basically just okay. This is actually kind of interesting, the way this sound was born. So this is obviously a super standard like chiptune sound basically. This is a super let me think of a famous tune that uses this. I don't know. I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but this is like insanely common for chiptune. This is almost as common as like the regular square wave. It's way easier to think of a famous song that uses this particular sound because because the regular square wave is the one that the original Mario uses in the, you know. But also, you know, obviously that one is also super common. And what this shape basically is, you might be thinking like, this doesn't look like any square wave I've ever seen. It's basically, if you take this guy, and no, I'm a moron. Hang on. If you take this guy, why is it being like that? What does the envelope look like? Get out of here. If you take this guy, the square wave, and you make one half of it smaller, this is called pulse width modified square wave. In like electronics, in like tech stuff, tech people use like oscilloscopes, which are this same sort of thing. Like oscilloscopes, like the piece of hardware, do the exact same thing that this oscilloscope up in the top middle does. And they use the same terminology as we do in music to describe square waves of pulse width modified. Another word for a square wave, by the way, is pulse wave. And when you shorten one of the halves of the pulse, it's called a pulse width modified. This is called a PWM square, basically. And I could just use this guy the way he is. And I could either, but the thing about this is in in physics, they call what this is, frick, I don't remember. I was just reading this on Wikipedia like an hour and a half ago. I'm gonna just look it up actually. 1 second. Um, um, do 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 do. Do 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 do. No, that's not it. What was I looking at? This is a really, really unnecessary tangent, but this is cool, so I want to get it right. Where are you? No, that's not it. What was I looking at? Oh, I remember what I was looking at. Okay. So, uh, so the middle line, the zero volume, how do I don't really know how to even explain this because I don't actually know anything about physics. I shouldn't have closed that tab. I didn't really even absorb what I was reading. Hang on. Okay. Whoops. Whoopsie. I just bumped my microphone. I've been doing that a lot because I just got a new microphone. I don't know if you probably cannot tell because they're both condensers and condensers all sound exactly the same, but got a new one, so I've been accidentally bumping into it over and over again. Anyway, so the thing about pulse width modified squares is they're because of the nature of what they are, they're like lopsided in terms of volume. Like with a regular square wave, exactly, it spends exactly the like average volume on both sides is the same, which means that the average volume of this guy is 0 dB. But with this guy, because it has more volume down here in the negatives, the average volume of this guy is in the negatives. Which means that if you had like a bunch of these guys as instruments in your track, the average volume of your whole track would be in biased one way or the other. Which is not like the end of the world or anything, but it's annoying for mastering purposes. Because it prevents you from being as loud as you could be. And the way to... Now, that being said, there's a trick to get around this. You may notice that this guy sounds a whole awful lot like this guy. even though these waves do not look alike at all. The way I made this guy, you may also have noticed that you can't get to this guy over here just by changing the shape. Like, obviously I did something kind of weird. And what I did was I right-clicked on the picture of the wave, and there's this option to convert shape to sine harmonics. And what this does is it basically builds that wave out of individual sine waves, which is something that's pretty cool about Citrus. This is another reason why I'm always going on and on and on about how great Harmor and Citrus and all of ImageLine's plugins are, because there are just things that you can do that you can't otherwise do thanks to them. Anyway, once I've done this, it's still not this guy, but what it is now its average volume is 0. Because for some reason, I couldn't tell you why, but when you use the option to convert the shape to sine harmonics, the resulting shape that it makes is always gonna be centered. Oh, by the way, that's why there's this center option here. So it's so that you can have a it's so that you can have a shape that's not centered, and you can just click that and it'll automatically move it to the center when you play it. That's another way of getting around this, but I wanted to use the cooler way because that's how I live my life. Anyway, because this is... Oh, by the way again, when a wave... or the fact that a wave has an average that is not 0, when that happens, that's called a DC offset. Like this wave, when it's shaped like this, that wave has a DC offset. And you'll also, like, in the, like, sampler, like, audio morphing options in FL, there's this option to remove the DC offset. That's also what that does, is it gets rid of that. This is not what I want. I want this guy, which is here. Anyway. So, but this guy is still not the same as this guy. And now how did I get there? Well, if you were paying attention to the screen, you probably can already tell as I swap between them, but there's another difference between them, and it's these guys. These are the phase values for all of the individual sine waves. All of these guys on the top half of this are the volume levels of all the sine waves. And this is the shape that the pulse width modified square wave has. You'll notice it's the reason that this particular type of wave sounds more like a saw wave than a square wave is because for one, it only has the really big snap once every it's not like symmetrical, basically. Symmetrical is not really a great way to put it because it well, no, I guess it kind of is. Like a square wave, the reason it square waves can sound like they're an octave higher than they actually are sometimes. The reason why that is because they're symmetrical. They have two, snaps for every oscillation. Saw waves and pulse width modified square waves don't really have that property because they're asymmetrical. They only have one, like really big moment for every oscillation. And because of that asymmetry, the pulse width modified square wave has more of the harmonics in the harmonic series than the square wave does. It has everyone except for 8, 16, 24, 32, except for all of the multiples of 8 ones. If I were a math or like, I don't know, maybe information theory guy or something like that, sort of, if I was a more of a numbers guy, I might have an explanation for like a more complete explanation for why that is, but basically it's kind of like a saw wave. Anyway, you just get rid of when you do this like conversion to sine harmonics, the pulse width modified square naturally has these phase values for all of the things, for all of the oscillators. If you just get rid of that, then it turns into this, and that's how you get there. Anyway. That's why that sounds like that. And then I also have it, I have a volume envelope like this, so it's more of a pluck. And I also have the volume last, I also have every note last for 2 quarter notes. Every note is a half note, basically. Because I wanted the notes to like overlap each other. Sort of this, think of this think of this line sort of like a harp. That's sort of the type of instrument I wanted this to be. And that's also the reason why the notes are the way they are. That's why I composed it this way. It doesn't sound like super similar to a harp or anything, but it sort of conjures up that same sort of image. Again, another thing that I sort of thought sounded appropriate for a cloudy themed sort of track. Anyway, on to the actually interesting part of this, the delay. So I've mentioned before in other streams that secretly phasers, choruses, and flangers are all actually delays. They're all just different versions of delay. And that means that you can get some of the same effects that you get out of those effects out of a delay. And an interesting thing that you can do with this particular delay plugin, I don't know if every single one works like this. Like, I don't know if you can do that. I don't know if you can do the same stuff with this guy. Actually, I'm pretty sure you cannot. As a matter of fact, there's not really a whole lot of point in me even using this plugin because I don't use any of the other delays. The point of this plugin is that there's 8 of them. This one's a little more complete. And the reason I use it for this effect is because of the time option can go all the way down to 1 millisecond, which is not typical of a delay, obviously, which you usually have synced up to the tempo. But here I have it turned all the way down. Or do I? Yeah, I do. And then I modulate the time and also or automate, not modulate. I automate the time and this rate knob here. Because when you automate these guys, they do interesting things. So So that's basically how I'm accomplishing that like wobbly, like whoa 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 sort of sound to this guy. And also it's sort of an interesting, like a really multifaceted sort of effect in the way it is used in this track, because at some points it sounds like a wah, like almost like a talk box sort of thing, like the opening riff to like living on a prayer or whatever, like that talk box sort of sound, the wah wah. And then at other points it sounds sort of like a Leslie speaker, like one of those rotating speakers that make organs sound all funky. And then at other points it's sort of like it's sort of, when it's really fast, I don't really have anything to compare that part of it to, but it's another sound, and it's another point of interest, I think. And now pay attention. I'm gonna just play these, and this time I want you to pay attention to these guys, because these are the clips that automate those knobs on the delay. I'm gonna go ahead and pull this guy back up. Hell yeah. So, yeah, the most interesting thing, that the delay, that like the biggest reason to use a delay over a oh yeah, no problem, man. You can go, there's no worries. Anyway, the biggest reason to use a delay over like a flanger or a chorus or something is because the time variable goes so freaking, you can change it all the way from 1,000 milliseconds to 1, which you cannot usually do in like chorus plugins and stuff like that. So, and also you can snap it all the way from the highest value to the lowest. And if you turn off the keep pitch value, but turn on the smoothing, it's like, it does all that stuff. It really throws the pitch all over the place, and that leads to some interesting things like this. And that's a lot of the reason why I love doing this. And that's a lot of the secret sauce to this particular synth bit. And then I'm also using a stereo enhancer to delay the left channel of this synth by 17.1 milliseconds. The particular number of milliseconds is not important, but what's important is that the left and right channel are not the same as each other, because that makes it sound like this. another thing that adds to the cloudy sort of feel. Like I wanted this track to feel is basically like I wanted to conjure up an image in the listener, when they're like not even playing the game but just listening to the track. I wanted to sort of feel like you're like magically floating in the air through clouds and stuff like and shit like that. So to have some stereo stuff going on, I think contributes to that a little bit. That's why I wanted that, and then some regular delay. Wait, what? Did I mean for it to only trigger once? Why is it like that? Okay, a very, very small amount of delay, apparently. Feedback 25%. What if I put it at like here? Okay, I'm a little surprised it's like that, but I don't remember changing anything, so I'm gonna leave it the way it is. Oh! I wasn't even looking at the screen, bro. Wow, I'm a moron. Anyway. I'm automating the feedback of the delay. So... Yeah, the delay and reverb are being automated also alongside the other delay. So yeah, I raised the volume on the delay and reverb to sort of like push into the next measure to sort of like anticipate. Let me unmute everything and listen for this increase in the delay and reverb volume. Okay, let's mute some stuff and see if it's easier to hear, because it's pretty subtle. Okay, it must be the compressor that's making it to be that way. Let's turn some stuff on. I don't know why that turned back on. I didn't want it to. Oh yeah, anyway. The reverb and the delay are automated. Let me put them right here and turn you off. So yeah, automating reverb and delay and stuff. especially reverb is a especially reverb is a really easy, simple way to make certain moments pop out a little bit more. You hear this all the time, especially with vocals, where like the vocalist will hit some high note or whatever, or there's some like emphasized note for that moment. If you make the reverb a little bit louder, it makes that moment pop out a little bit more. So that's what I'm doing a lot here. And then this is some compression, super basic stuff. And the limiter's not really doing a whole lot. Okay. And then and then there's another one of these, the same 4-pad sounds, impulse response is also on here. The same as with the keyboard at the beginning. Did I ever talk about the rest of this stuff on this guy? I don't think I did. I mean, there's nothing too complicated, but I'll go over it briefly. So there's a phaser with this guy. Like I said, this is just a delay. Let me turn off all these guys. That's the sound going into it, and here's it with the phaser. You don't need to worry about what any of these values are. I'm pretty sure I left it all at the default when you just open the plugin. So the important thing is that it's a phaser. Like I said earlier, it's a delay, it causes phase cancellation. It just basically plays more than one of the synth at once in different phase, like with different phase, so that it cancels out certain frequencies, and that's how you get a phaser sound. And then some EQ to bring all that stuff, to rein it all in a bit. Because this is not supposed to be a super harsh, like that sounds like some pretty like intense bass or whatever, and that's not really what I'm going for, so that's what this EQ does, reins that whole stuff in. And then this is some more distortion. I don't just use this to distort the sound, I also use it because it makes the volume, all of the volume the same, which makes mixing a breeze, so I like to do that whenever I can get away with it. And then there's some compression, super basic stuff. I'm also super basic except for I'm cutting off the low end because I don't want anything below 200 hertz on this guy. Because like with the keyboard synth, I don't want any bass for this guy because there is bass playing, so there's no point. And then another limiter. Again, just making the volume the same, and then a impulse response. And I'm also automating this, I think. Oh yeah. Whoops. So here at this part, this automation clip is bringing down the dry on this convolver so that this synth is just the reverb, for the parts where all the drums cut out and everything cuts out and it's just the like pseudo harp moment, it's sort of supposed to be like a fluttery sort of it's sort of, I mean, it's a, you know, a particular bit and I want to cut out this synth for this part, but I don't want it to be completely gone. I just want it to be not as present. I want it to be farther away, basically. So that's why I do this little thing here. So yeah, that also, I think, contributes to the, or, you know, it comports with the theme, basically. All right. And then another limiter, and what's this guy doing? Nothing, just bringing the volume down again. Okay, so now what else was I gonna talk about? Oh, another thing with the first guy, which I haven't turned the compression back on. So another thing with this guy, this guy is contributing to the whoosh factor. For this moment where all the drums cut out and everything that I was just talking about, this bit right here. This guy is, I'm using this guy to sort of lead us into that. Watch here. Yep. I'm using a high pass. I think it's literally this guy. It is not. I'm wrong. Does something else? It's in Harmor, I think. It's here. This guy. Yep. And also I'm using the high pass filter with some resonance. And I'm just sweeping it across the frequencies. And it hits the peak, it hits the tippy top part of the frequency range. Not literally the tippy top, but like the part where it's the most up there. The part where it's right to stop, basically. Where the correct part goes up to there and then it falls back down. It's sort of it does the same job as like, what are you, 16 and 17? It does the same job as like these guys. It basically does the same thing as all those. It contributes to the ebb and flow of the dynamic range of the track. So that's why that happens. And now, next up, I'm gonna go ahead and talk about this melody. Because I am super duper happy with how this sounds. So yeah. Man, I love that. So, one thing you will have noticed from the older versions, not that one, this one, is that it's worse in the old versions. There was some fine tuning necessary to go from that to this, but you can hear even back then the sort of the beginnings. So that's a good example of that bit right there. In the old version, it was this. I'm gonna just mute these guys. No, it was this. I think. Something like that. Yeah, I think that's right. And that was cool. But and I sort of wanted it to stay on the 7th because that's a little more dissonant and just personally a little more interesting to me. But I eventually changed it to this, mostly to keep it in line with the first instance of this melody. It just didn't really flow right. It didn't really make sense to be the way it was before. So that's why it's this now. So you'll see it goes from the root to the 7th to the 3rd to the 7th and then to the octave. I didn't really choose those notes for any particular reason. Like there's nothing stopping it from being that. Or this. I mean, it could have been either one of those. Either one is fine. Or even like this. Like there's nothing inherently wrong with any of those options. I just went with these because it just sort of felt right. I don't really know. I don't really have a super satisfying explanation, but I just think this was the best option. And then when the melody kicks in, or the harmony, rather, it's mostly thirds, as you would sort of expect. Actually, I think it's entirely thirds. Yeah, every single note in the harmony is just a third above what the melody is. Except for this very last one. And with this part. But I think the rest of it is all thirds. By the way, if you're wondering, I'm double right-clicking to swap between the ghost notes. Oops. Yeah, it's pretty much all thirds, except for right here and right here. Anyway. I'm getting that fade out effect without without volume automation, by the way, by just having the MIDI note slide to a note with the volume of 0, which is a pretty lazy way of doing it, but it works here, so I don't care. And just because I'm kind of feel like listening to it, let's turn the harmony off. Okay. So here's the melody with no harmony. And let's listen, why not? Let's listen to the harmony with no melody. Isn't it kind of interesting how they both on their own sound like completely different pieces of music? But together they're, you know. All right, now let's talk a little bit about the sound, what instrument that is, like what the sound design is all about. It's not going to take very long because it's almost the exact same as the pseudo harp guy. In fact, it's the exact same shape. Pulse width modified square, convert shape to sine harmonics, and turn off all of the phases. And here's it with no effects. And then I just added some delay and reverb. Oh man, that's awesome. This is the reason, that is pretty much the reason why I love using the pulse width modified square waves so much, especially for melodies, because they respond so nicely to reverb and to delay. It just sounds so... It sounds so nice. I don't really know what to say about it. It just, for some reason, it responds better than other types of waves, to my ears anyway. It's a little bit weird because you almost it's like it's almost conventional for that type of wave to not have as much reverb on it as most others, because when you use it, typically you're trying to imitate an 8-bit style, in which case reverb is not really on the table unless you're like me and being lazy about it and you're going to do whatever you want. But I personally really like using pulse width modified squares with reverb, with lots of reverb, because I think it sounds super nice. And then there's high pass, pretty basic. Same reason as all the other high passes, there's no point in that instrument having bass. And yet again, I'm just using a limiter to bring the volume down. That's a pretty consistent theme throughout everything that I've shown you so far, because most of the loudness in the finished product comes from the mastering, which is a bunch of compression, and then, you know, basically makeup gain, but it's technically a limiter, but it does the function of makeup gain. What else? What else is there? Let's talk about the rest of the composition of this guy. Alright, let's talk about these chords. Man, do I love these chords. This is the chords that play in this part are basically half of the reason that this track works as well as it does for the purpose that it serves. The reason why it has that sort of, one of the reasons why it has that sort of you know, ear candy sort of effect to it, especially in this part, is because of these chords. So I'm gonna go ahead and turn off the filter for this so you can hear them a little more easily. So this is pretty similar to something I have already made, but there is a complication that I forgot about until this very moment. Let me take a look at the bass real quick. Not this bass apparently. Okay. Okay. Okay, actually, there is no complication. The complication was in my own mind. I pulled a prank on myself. So, nope. Okay. So these chords right here look like B chords. Don't be fooled. They're actually D chords. So, because over here, you can see the bass is playing a D. That's on purpose, because they're D chords. So this is the third track on my EP, my most recent EP, does this same chord progression, basically. It's in a different key, but it's the same chord progression. So let me open up a new pattern to explain what's happening here. So where are you? Where's this note? Okay. So there's this thing that people used to do in the olden days, but is not really so popular anymore unless you're like Radiohead or somebody, or if you're, basically there's this thing called a plagal cadence, and it sounds like this. So, whoa, I just bumped my thing again. Okay. Anyway, there's this thing called a plagal cadence, and it's that. It's basically minor 4 to the major 1. Technically, major 4 to major 1 counts as a plagal cadence, technically, but the plagal cadence sound, if anybody's ever like, oh man, I love plagal cadences, they're talking about the creep chord, basically. Anyway, it has sort of an old school sound to it because it's like sort of a it's sort of a thing people used to do in like certain jazz styles a lot, basically. This is also the Buddy Holly thing. Anyway. Anyway, so the general way you do a plagal cadence is you just do the 1 and the 4, and then you switch the 4 from major to minor, and then you go back to the 1. In Creep, they do a major 3, which is a bit of a complication to this whole thing, but it's basically still the same. It gets the same idea across. That also, in Creep, that also has the added benefit for the composer of having a chromatic like connection between all of the chords. Like that's constantly happening. So there's some like sort of symmetry to it. There's sort of a connection between all the chords that way. What I do differently here is I'm gonna put it in the key that this actual track is in. First of all, I start on the 4 instead of starting on the 1. I start on this chord, and then I go to the minor. And then the next chord is A. But I play A major 7 because I don't give a fuck. And then I use this trick that is super common in jazz, where basically you go from Like this is a super common like improviser's sort of trick if you improvise on piano or whatever. Um, if you're starting on a major 7, it's basically the chord change from a major 7 to the minor 7 that is a half step below that major 7 is a pretty nice chord change. So like you can already tell just from that it's a nice chord change. It sounds nice. And things that sound nice are what I want in this track, so. So I wanted to do that. Now, a composer might be scared away from doing that because that, for one thing, it's not diatonic. I don't think anyway. Well, no, I guess it is. No, it's not diatonic. For one thing, it's non-diatonic. But for another thing that might scare you away from doing it is this chord is a tritone away from the 4. So it's, you might play those 2 chords and be like, that sounds kind of weird. I don't know if I want to do that. But I did want to do it. And it's because the tritone, I don't even know if I can really explain it. It has a certain effect that I really like here. You can see? Maybe that way illustrated it better, but, you know. The going down to the tritone has a like a, not really bluesy, but it has a quality to it that I like for this. Like, I think you can hear it there. The way the 5th from the A flat, or G sharp chord rather, the 5th, is a half step away from the root of the 4, and the way the root of the G sharp is a whole step away from the 3rd of the 4, like that. I just think the chords go nicely together. I find it to be a pretty pleasant transition, despite the tritone. and I especially like how I especially like emphasizing it by, whoops, I bumped my thing again. I especially like emphasizing it by moving the bass by that tritone. And like I don't do anything funky with the bass to try and avoid using that interval. I specifically emphasize it with the bass. It just has a really I don't know, it sounds nice. I like it. In fact, I liked it so much that I did it again. I just took that chord progression and I stuck it in here because that's how I live my life. There are people who would have a certain sort of reaction to the fact that I did the same thing again. I think that reaction is a mistake, and I personally don't. I would recommend you be less afraid of I don't know, doing things that are similar to other things, basically. The truth of the matter is, there's nothing new under the sun, so do whatever you want, in my opinion. The truth is, there was never anything else that was gonna go in this spot in this track. These were the only chords that could ever be here. That's the way I see it. Because these are the chords that are correct here. So that's why I used them. And that's why this track sounds like this. And I really like the way it sounds. So what else should I talk about? There are some chords over here that I should mention. Okay, so what goes on in this part of the track is mostly pretty basic, but there's some interesting nuances to be picked apart. So, first off, the 4 goes to the 1 as it did before, but then instead of the minor 7 chord right below it, I go to the 3 and the 2. And then to the 6. Now, I said earlier that a lot of the writing of this track was me basically on cruise control. This is the most This is the most obvious example of that right here. This was me letting the chords take me to whatever the next logical chord was, just over and over again, basically. So here we start on the 1. And then we go to the 3, the 2, the 6, the 5, 6, and then this chord is a borrowed chord from C sharp minor, harmonic minor, that is. We start this little passage in A. Actually, we start this whole section starting from here, or from here rather, in A. Basically, the track starts in B, but it's like non-diatonic, and we swap between B and C over and over again. And then this section is in A. So we start. So over here is A. Honestly, you could interpret this part, I think, as if it's in E. Yeah. Let me take a look at the melody over here. Okay, yeah. The traditional way you would interpret this, I think, is that right here, this measure, we have a key change to E. Actually, looking back, it's a little dubious if we were ever in A. Because there are parts where it's basically A Lydian, I think. Because I'm using the D sharp here instead of D. Which, but then I also use D, so, it's basically A. I think I'm okay with calling that A. But then here, excuse me. But then here, I think it's pretty much a full-blown key change to E. That's the way I'm gonna say. That's what I'm gonna say it is anyway. And then these next chords, are super duper standard, like extremely standard. This is pretty basic stuff going on here. Like, this is stuff that would not feel out of place, like, you know, in like a Christian worship song or whatever, with like the 4, 6, 5, 2, 1. Like, come on. But that's basically what's going on here. It's just going from one chord to the next, doing whatever is the least uncomfortable, basically. And I also have the arpeggios going. They're all 7th chords, and the arp here also takes on the role of the melody a little bit by having this like you know, this descending little bit here. This is basically functioning as the melody a little bit. So, where's the basic? There it is. So basically this part is like in E. Whoa. Whoops. Okay, and then we have another key change to C sharp minor from E, with starting with this G sharp dominant 7 chord, which is what this is. This is a super basic perfect cadence, or no, imperfect cadence. Because if it was a perfect cadence, you would have the frickin', you would have the root of each chord in the melody, which, wait a minute, I do. I do have the root of each chord in the melody. I just said this was acting like the melody, and I have the... Okay, so it's a perfect cadence. Wow. I accidentally did a super duper, like, classical perfect cadence. Wow. But basically this is a 5-to-1 cadence. It's a dominant 5 chord to the 1 minor, so not like I'm breaking new ground here or anything. And then this is also C sharp. There are these notes in the bass. It just switches to the other version of the instrument. By the way, these are just clones of each other. I'm pretty sure the only difference is that one of these has distortion. Yeah, that's pretty much it. One of them has a more extreme filter and more distortion, and that's, or a less extreme filter and more distortion, and that's it. So and then in this new key C sharp, we stay on the 1 for a while, and then we go to the 6. You could interpret this as another key change back to E, but it would be E major, so the key signature would be the same. So basically it's a 6, a 1, a flat 7, or is it? Where the frick is my bass? Yeah, flat 7, and then another key change, actually. So this part is the most interesting part in the track, to be honest. Like this part is like whatever, because it's the same as this part over here, pretty much. So then I take this B chord, and then make it minor. So it's a B6, and then it goes to B minor 6. Which you'll remember, from major to minor, if it's the 4, is the start of a plagal cadence. So then I go to the next chord that would be in a plagal cadence, because why not? So basically, starting here, you could also interpret it as another key change to F sharp minor, or major rather, to F sharp, because this is a plagal cadence and then it goes to F sharp. But actually, I wouldn't interpret it like that, because the F sharp is a dominant. It's a F sharp dominant chord. So here's the really, really interesting part. The reason why I had this plagal cadence bit and like this secondary subdominant to get us to F sharp, the reason I wanted to get to F sharp here is because way back at the beginning, I want this to loop. Way back at the beginning, this is a B chord, and F sharp is the 5 of B, which means that basically that F sharp dominant leads into B. So like it has the leading tone, you know. So that's why I have the F sharp here, because I want to get back to B. But I don't just want to do another 5 to 1. I did a 5 to 1 over here. I want to do something a little bit more interesting to get us back to the beginning. So there is this trick from in jazz called a tritone substitution, where basically you take your dominant chord, and before you go to the 1, which would be this, before you go there, you move the dominant chord a tritone away to whatever chord is the one that's a tritone away. So for F sharp it would be C. So you would switch from F sharp dominant to C dominant and then go to the 1 afterwards. So it would sound like this. It would be like this. Traditionally, it would be something like this. Well, hold on. Basically, you hear that a lot in jazz. I didn't demonstrate it super well, but that's basically the idea. You substitute the dominant chord for the dominant chord a tritone away because they both share the leading tone and the third. C dominant and F sharp dominant share both of these notes, which are the most important ones for the cadence. So that's why you do a tritone substitution. There's another thing you can do. You'll notice this chord is not C dominant. I'm not substituting it for the tritone. I'm substituting it for the note that is a major third above the 1. So this is something that I like to do instead of a tritone substitution, because that can sound like really overtly jazzy in a way that it sounds too much. It sounds like I'm doing a 2/5, you know? It sounds like I'm about to be like I'm literally about to do some shit like that. Like that sounds really like too much jazz. That sounds like jazz like or like it's too like expected, too much like, you know, that's the thing that everybody does all the time because it's like whatever. So instead, a trick that I do is to go to the chord that's a major third away from the root is what I do, I think. Because I think it works in both ways. Let me think a second. No. What? Would it work in both ways? Hang on a sec. Let me open up a new pattern. It might work. Hang on. Oh, there's no way that would work. it's just the same chord a half step away. Why did I think that would work? I didn't think about that very hard. But anyway, the trick is I substitute the chord that is a major third above the 1. So if the one is B, so I substitute for E flat dominant. So it's like this. So that's the chord I use. Because the note a major third above the 1 has the leading tone still. I said before that these 2 notes are the most important for the cadence. The most important of those 2 is the leading tone. So really, as long as you have that still, you can pretty much make any chord go back to the 1. But I like doing the 1 a major third above the 1. So like, listen to the bottom notes in the line here from this synth. Where it goes like that. It has like that little nice melodic sort of. So that's the last little piece of complication I added to this piece to bring it all together and to wrap it around at the beginning. I'm not sure exactly if there's a whole lot else left to explain. This looks sort of complicated, but it's basically just an arpeggio. It's all the notes from this chord, but, you know, played one at a time, basically. I could talk about the, like, impulses and whooshes. Oh yeah, and the elephant in the room, this guy. So, what I'm gonna play now is just the chords. And the noisy like effects, the whooshes, and then a secret third thing that I'm going to talk about in a second, and nothing else. Everything else is muted. Alright. Now, let's talk about all that stuff that you just heard. So, first off, the simple stuff, the whooshes. Okay. So, this first guy right here is just a crash symbol. Nope, it's in here. This guy. Where are you? Doop. And underscore real. It's that guy. It's just, there's some formant shifting. There's some funky stuff going on here. It's nothing too out of the ordinary for what I do. There's some time stretching. Yeah, no. Pretty basic stuff for me. And then in here, I cut off the low end naturally, and there's reverb, and that's it. Pretty simple. And this next guy, 16. This one's actually sort of interesting, because there's no reverb on this one. And it is an impulse response file. It's not actually a, actually, I don't know if it's, I don't think it's from a room. It might be synthetic. Anyway, it sounds like that. You're intended to use it for convolution reverb. Anyway, I use these files sometimes for making these whooshes, because they're, I mean, pretty noisy, and also they're different from other ones. And they don't have, sometimes these sort of samples of this sort of thing, sometimes people who make those sort of try too hard and to like make them different from all the other ones, and that can make them annoying to use. But the impulse responses are like as simple as it gets. It's just, you know, it's just the sound that happens when you make a loud noise in a place. So I tend to like to use these. Anyway, this one I'm stretching it out using my usual method. I just stretch it just because I can. I reversed it, obviously. And then I started the sample after the start of it, because it doesn't start at full volume, and I want it to start. I want the peak of it to be where it cuts off. Because again, there's no reverb gonna be on this. There's no reverb on this one, so I want it to cut off sharply, because it leads into this like moment here. I want it to be sort of, you know, exciting and dramatic and dynamic, so I cut it off as soon as I can. Excuse me. I cut it off as soon as I can. Not only for it to be dynamic and dramatic, but also so the next one can take over right after it. So that's that one, and the next one is this one. This one's a little more simple, I think. Oh, no, it's not, actually. I'm also stretching this one a whole bunch, and for formant shifting way up high, which has this effect, by the way. Formant shifting has a more real effect on voices, because that's what a formant like is the profile of a voice. Generally, that's like, you know, what that's understood to be. So formant shifting on a thing that's just noise doesn't really do a whole lot, except it gives it more treble, basically. is all that's really useful for here. I'm also starting this one again, not at the beginning, because I don't actually know if it starts at full volume or not. Let's see. It doesn't, so I start it later. Do I put reverb on this one? There's reverb on this one, yeah. Pretty simple. Pretty basic stuff going on here. I'm also cutting out this approximately 4 kilohertz range again, because well, let's find out why. Just as I thought. Pretty annoying, so get that out of there. Way more pleasant. And that one's 19, right? Yeah. Okay, and now the most interesting one probably is 18. The one that's in channel 18. Because this one, the impulse response that this one is this one. So this one is interesting because I used the fact that this impulse file has some low end to it. So I gave it this like insanely extreme EQ to bring out the low end, and that sounds like this. Without it, it would sound like this. I wanted to use the fact that it has low end when you like fade in something low end. Sometimes people do this by, and sometimes I'll do this by just using a reverse kick sample. Like you could just take a kick from like in here. Like something like that, and just hit reverse. And maybe do that. People do that sort of thing all the time, and that's a really... Basically, you can have risers in the low end, just like you can have risers in the high end. So I wanted to take advantage of the fact that this sample has some low end. So... And you can afford to have it be noisy. It doesn't have to be one tone. It's okay if it's noisy. And then a whole bunch of compression. Actually not that much compression, but some compression. And then some... I'm crunching it pretty hard with a limiter. Because I did this basically because you're not going to get rid of the high end by doing this. The high end distortion does not get rid of high end, but so I wasn't really like worried about losing that, but it does but the lower frequencies, when you distort them, they like interrupt the high frequencies when the low frequencies are at their peak. So you end up with overall a more obvious presence of the lower frequencies. So yeah. Oh, hang on one second. Dog's moving around. Alright, I'm back. Almost done here. So, where was I? I had just explained, had low end on this guy. Now the last thing to talk about is the last key to the atmosphere of this track. Is this guy who's playing over the whole freaking thing. This is what it sounds like. It's the whole track again, but like far away or something. Oh, and also it gets sidechained. So like and this is it without these effects. As you can hear, it literally is just the track without drums, I think. Literally what I did to make that is I just turned these off. I think I put another limiter on. I turned this off. I turned it down on a limiter so it wasn't clipping. And then I just recorded the whole thing. I probably also turned off the whooshers. Did I? I don't remember actually. Yeah, I think I did. I think it was just the instruments, so I turned these guys off, all of these guys, and it was just these, and I just did this. And I recorded through the whole thing, and then when I had that, I hit this button, the blur. I'm pretty sure I left it to default and just hit accept, and that's literally all I did. Okay, I might have turned the bass off too. I don't really remember. But anyway, through some means sort of like that. Oh, I still have this here. Oops. I basically got that result out of doing that, something like that. And then I put it back over the whole thing to play again, so it's like pseudo reverb. At least I think it's would be like pseudo reverb. Oh, and also it literally does clip, except that it doesn't because it's 32-bit floating point, so it's not really possible for it to clip. But Anyway, it might not be pseudo reverb if reverb plugins actually function like that. I don't actually know how they function, but it's, you know, sort of like reverb. It does the job of reverb, and then I have some more reverb on top of it, just to fuzz it up a little bit more. And then I have the lo-fi effect again with the mix down to 30%, so it doesn't, you know, just so it doesn't crowd out the whole thing and make it annoying. But I have a little bit of that going on, and then some compression, naturally. Just a little bit of compression. And then another high pass, because there's no point in this having low end. And then again, I'm just bringing down the volume with a limiter. So it's easy to mix and master. And the mixing and mastering, I'm going to spend like 2 minutes on, because it's not very complicated. I basically had the mastering of this track be pretty similar to what I normally do, but because of the nature of what it is and the theme, I didn't want to push it super hard to be super duper ultra loud like a lot of what I do. It's okay if this one's a little bit chiller. If I don't need to win the loudness wars with this one or anything, so I was a bit chillaxed about it. The only really interesting thing going on here is the low end, where there's this point. Basically, this point is where the bass volume is most of the time. So like right here. I have that point where the bass is, and then I have two curves sort of leveling out this part so that the bass is at mostly the same volume the whole time. But then I still have the volume eventually does go all the way up to here so that the kick still has some dynamic range with the bass. So that the low end sounds like this. Also, I usually have the low, the red part here, be just where the kick is, and the orange part here start below the snare, the low end of the snare. But for this track, I just have the kick and the snare both be in the low end, because frankly, it's like not important that they be separate at all. The mix is plenty transparent when they're in the same band. So, and then this is super basic, and then this next one, again, this is super basic. I just move this guy back a little bit, just to lower the amplitude a bit, and then I have a curve to you know, compress to reduce the dynamic range just a teensy weensy bit. This is super lightweight, like compression stuff, not doing anything super unusual here. And then this is basically makeup gain. I have the timings really tight, and I bring it up so that it's just loud enough that the limiter does something, but the limiter is not really like affecting the overall feel of it very much. I'm mostly just bringing it up to 0 dB. Like for most other tracks, I would push the gain here a little bit more, but for this one, um, it really, it like doesn't need it. It's not that kind of track. It does not need to be super loud or anything. It's totally fine the way it is. Um, I can't really think of anything else, anything that I haven't mentioned yet. So I'm probably gonna wrap the stream up here. Later on down the line, I'm gonna go through all the other tracks. I don't know if I'm gonna do any new writing on stream in the foreseeable future. I might do some recording on stream. I might do some, I don't know, I might stream something. I might not. I don't know. But that's all I got for this one, I suppose. So I'm gonna go ahead and end it now.